I don't know a lot about Torkel other than what I've read. Earlier, you heard the term neurotypical. I think he is, from what I can tell. He's got a cool accent, and you'll hear that in a minute. But Torkel is a father, I think, probably as much as he's anything else. And the story that I read about him in the New York Times magazine that Stephanie gave me a year and a half ago or so talked about a guy that was going to work in IT and software and coming home and struggling with one of his three children, his three boys, but was noticing, rather than a disability, particular abilities that his son had. And as I was talking to him a little bit today, I did ask him, what do you do for fun? And he said, well, when in Denmark, I used to ride bicycle pretty religiously. And then based upon his observing how we drive in this country, he switched to bird watching. He felt it was much safer. But he said he does like to drive and travel, but then he said, but my mind is going all the time. I'm thinking about how I can help people like my son. And he got associated with families that also had children on the autism spectrum in Denmark. And he saw that he could not put a business together, but that he could put together a social entrepreneurial effort that could help a lot of folks. And he's real quick to say, my goal in the United States is to create 100,000 jobs for people on the autism spectrum. And I believe he's going to do it, and I think he's made some important connections here. I'm glad that he had a chance to talk with you, Bob, from Source America, that I think we can kick this into the next gear and maybe make things start happening at a rapid pace. We're excited to have Torkel Sone of Special Sterne here. Please give him a warm round of applause.
Well, thank you for this kind introduction. I'm really impressed with this conference, and thanks for being so persuasive, Stephanie, to bring me out here. Stephanie has been insisting that Utah and Salt Lake City would be a great place for me to do my song and dance and see if we could do something together here. I'd like to start with a story about my favorite flower, the dandelion. The dandelion is loved by kids. They blow dandelions, they make necklaces, they have fun. But as you grow older, something happens. And if you buy a house with a garden and you see the dandelion again, probably the love has turned to hate, because now your norms are different. Now your garden has to be as perfect, at least, as the neighbors, and only the flowers that you have decided upon are welcome. The flower is the same, but you have changed. If you see the dandelion as a weed, you will just be spraying it and never get access to the virtues of this plant. But if you see it as an herb, and if you take it from the lawn and put it in the kitchen garden, grow it, you'll get access to all the virtues. You'll find that it's one of the most valuable plants in nature. It can be used for nutrition, natural medicine, coffee, tea, wine, beer. And there's a smart farmer in Denmark who grows dandelions. He can make a living out of treating this flower as an herb where others treat it as a weed. I have 3 sons. They are all dandelions. We are all dandelions. We all had this in us to be a wonderful flower. But when the time comes where we are blown away as a seed out in the community, some will land on hard ground. They'll be seen as non-welcome. They'll be seen as weeds. Some will be lucky enough to land in ground where they are welcomed. They'll be seen as herbs. For most people in this community, it's really the social skills that depend if you'll be seen as welcome or not welcome. In the school system, already when they start in school, they work in teams. If they take a further education, if you can't find your team to work with through college, through education, then you're really lost. And that is independent of the skill sets that you have. If you make it to the labor market and go to a recruiter, and if you do not excel in social skills, you won't get a job, regardless of how many skills you can bring to the table. For my two oldest sons, when they were blown away from home, probably they'll land on welcome ground. They are what is called neurotypicals. Yeah. So the neurotypicals are the ones who do not have autism. And my youngest son has autism. He's a very smart guy. He has a wonderful memory. He can see patterns where no one else can. He's extremely good at structuring things, making analyses. He's a chess player type, train lover. He knows the schedules better than the railway company in Denmark. But he does not have friends. He's not on Facebook. He's very much in his home with his family where he feels comfortable. But outside his comfort zone, he's seen as a person with disability. And he was given an autism diagnosis 14 years ago. And as a family, we have to go through some phases. So first, we know our son better. He's not disabled. He was 3 years old at that point of time. He's caring. He is. You can trust him. He's organized. He's structured, just as you would love from any kid. But in the kindergarten, with 20, 30 kids, adults who want him to play social games all the time, it was another kid they saw. So, as parents, we, after coming through the phases of denial and recognition, we came to the phase, okay, this is the situation. We have a disabled son. We could recognize after reading the disability, the autism diagnosis, that yes, we recognize all the traits. They have not exchanged papers. It is our son. Then we come to the phase where we think of what will happen in the future, what will happen when we are not there to support him anymore. Because as long as we're capable, of course, we'll fight his battles at any time. But there'll come a time where we will not be able to fight his battles. How can he be seen from the same angle as from the parents' angle? How can he find his comfort zone in the labor market that's rejecting people who don't have the social skills? I came up with the challenge that after being active in Autism Denmark, where I ended up as president of a local branch of Autism Denmark, I met so many adolescents and adults with autism who were in the same situation. They were very skilled, but none of them had a job where they could make use of their skills because the labor market store was closed. I was at that time a technical director in an IT company, and I could see that, my goodness, good memory, structured mind, perseverance in repetitive tasks, pattern recognition skills would be just wonderful in the IT sector. For software testing, quality control, data analysis, data entries. But it's hard to find people in that industry for these kind of jobs, like software testing, quality control, data analysts. Why is it? There are so many unemployed, there are so many vacant jobs. It's just because the way we think in the labor market. We see too many weeds and too few herbs. in our society. And I think when you leave here today, if you just remember every time you see a dandelion, do I see the weed or do I see an herb? You can take that and say, if you see a person who is peculiar, who is not like you, don't regard this person automatically from a weed perspective. There could be a lot of herbs in there. And I in particular liked the last panelist from the National Guard and from the police department, your ability to see, well, also vulnerable people, homeless people, there can be a lot of herbs in there. But we're so used to see the weeds. One of the latest employees of Specialisterne, my concept, was actually, we had some trouble with the paperwork because he was living in a shelter. I'm so happy for being able to employ him because now he can get out of the shelter and get an apartment and start having a life as anyone else. I came up with the challenge that maybe it's not our son and the other ones I met with autism who is the problem here. Maybe it's our society that has taken a wrong course where everyone have to live up to standard expectations. So I started what's called Specialisterne, Danish for the specialists. That's 10 years ago. And the purpose is to establish a comfort zone where people with autism and similar challenges can come, find their talent. We can work with employers, with the state, with the families to assess and train the talent and then bring them into jobs where they can excel, doing jobs at least as good or even better than the ones who are there already. Since I've been contacted by families in about 90 countries who wants me to come and help doing something similar in their country. And autism is not a Danish phenomenon, I found out. It's a global phenomenon. And the latest figures from the US Center of Disease Control says that 1 in 68 out of school children at the age of 8 have autism. Autism is a wide spectrum, but about 1.5% of all students in the US will probably be somewhere on the spectrum. That's a lot of people. That is 3, 4, 5 million people in the US. And it's a lifelong disability, so there are reasons to believe that the 1.5% also goes for adults. Most of these will not have a diagnosis because when they grew up there were not so many psychiatrists. But many you'll probably find where there are homeless people, where there are people, probably many in the jails as well, because what if you can't have eye contact with an officer? Well, that can be a serious problem for you because you may be misunderstood with your intentions and may end up in jail. After having so many requests from many countries, I came up with the ambition to say, let's set the goal high. Let's enable 1 million jobs for people with autism and similar challenges. I believe we can do that, and the US is a key market, really a location where we can make a true impact. So we've been looking at the US. I had very many requests from the US, and then Governor McKell from Delaware read about us in the New York Times and reached out to me and said, come over here. I'll set up meetings with local stakeholders because we have a lot of high-tech industry here and we have more and more people being diagnosed with autism. Governor McKell, he was the chair a year ago at the National Governors Association, where he brought in his initiative for the year called A Better Bottom Line, employing people with disabilities. And he brought employment of people with disabilities onto the agenda of all governors across the US. I'm often being asked, why Delaware? But I think it takes a community really to make a difference. It's not enough that one company, one state, one NGO, one parent organization says, we want to do this. It has to be a community. And it really helps when the governor chairs the meetings locally. And Delaware is a small state. If you bring the right 10 people to the table, then you are very well founded. So the Governor McKell made me an American. I'm being Americanized now. I relocated to Delaware with my family. My wife and youngest son, Lars, who has autism, who's 17 years old now, attends a high school here. The two older siblings, we had to live in Denmark because they are attending universities, and that would be way too costly to bring them here to the US. So June last year, I started Specialisterne in Delaware. In Denmark, I started a 5-month assessment and training program. In the US, it's a 4-week training program because we work so closely with the stakeholders here. We have the first week is about creating the individual's comfort zone. Most people with autism have never had a job. Those who had a job, for them it has been a bad experience. So we have to regain their comfort zone, their self-confident. We use a tool called Lego Mindstorms robots because it has to be fun, there has to be a physical element. And when we work with Lego Mindstorms robots, we find a different angle to learn about learning profiles, give them some excuse to work together even though they have been told all their life that they cannot do that. The training takes place at the corporate site, so they have to get used to getting a badge, meeting on time, having managers, having colleagues, and so on. And it can be a really dramatic change in the life of a person with autism. Second week is where we do all the things that normally are regarded to be difficult. It's project work. We give them a challenge to work with. We introduce an agile development framework called Scrum that is very much used in the IT industry. It's about teamwork, it's about flexibility, it's about dealing with the unknown. You should think that cannot be done for people with autism, but I can tell you it can. We invite external judges to come at the end of the 4 week of the Scrum week, the second week, and evaluate the performance of the group based on documentation, innovative robotic solutions, and the presentation they give to the judges. And they score very high. It's so fantastic. So week 2 is where we grow from individual to a team comfort zone. Week 3 is where we assess the skill set that are normally regarded to come with autism: memory, pattern recognition skills, perseverance, high performance even in repetitive tasks. We introduce software testing, quality, documentation. We still use the Lego Mindstorms robots because they can be programmed. We exchange, so we ask them to embed bugs in the other groups, Lego Mindstorms programs. So it's still fun to learn about software testing and documentation. The fourth and last week is where we introduce more and more of the work zone. Combine the work zone with the comfort zone. That's where the magic takes place. And then we work with the corporate partners to set up a support structure within the companies of hiring managers, buddies, mentors, so that we are not dependent on one manager wanting to employ a person with autism. This is about really changing the culture in the companies of our corporate partners. Our prime example of a corporate partner is SAP. They committed in May last year that 1% of their global workforce will be people with autism by 2020. They have 65,000 employees worldwide, so 650 people with autism will be employed by SAP before end of 2020. And we are working with SAP around the globe to make sure that they meet this number. Why does SAP do this? Well, it's not because to make them look good and feel good. It's really that they believe that innovation comes from the edges. And if you can bring in people who are different, who thinks differently, who approach challenges differently, that will add to their ability to create innovation. And in a global knowledge-based market economy, it's really the companies who are best at innovation that will be the leaders. This is also supported by Harvard Business School, because they use Specialisterne as a case study. They believe that the winners in the future will be the company who are best at managing what they call the outliers, those at the edges of normality, because there's a lot of things happening there. There's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of new ideas popping up, and it's really our ability to be different that will determine the innovative power of any organization. We're working with the National ARC organization. We have trained their chapters in New York and Philadelphia to do our training model. We have a partner called Expand Ability in the Silicon Valley. And we are ready to scale across the country. Our model for scaling is really to work through partnerships. And we are starting up in North Dakota now, Fargo. North Dakota makes Delaware look like a big state. I think the situation in North Dakota is probably quite similar to Utah. The unemployment rate is now at a level where you can say there's not really an unemployment here. It can be hard for companies to find enough qualified people in the high-tech sector. It's not as big a community as New York and California and Texas, so people know each others. And I think I've been listening today to the panelists and met some people and talked with Stephanie a lot. What will it take to do something similar here? Well, first of all, do we think that there's a need to bring more people into the labor market? And I think the conclusion after listening to the panelists today is yes, we need more talent. We need to bring people who are unemployed on the autism spectrum and with similar disabilities, because it's not just people with autism that are outside. There are so many being diagnosed these days. ADHD is just scaling so big. There are so many who want to contribute to the labor market. Now, for the area of autism, what I've heard is that probably 80 to 90% of people with autism are unemployed. Many of those have gone through good education. They have maybe a bachelor degree in computer science, but the better the education, the bigger the drop afterwards, trying to get into the labor market. I think what I've heard here today is also that there's a lot of, it's a well-connected community. So what we'll need in order to get started here is maybe we just need the people in this room. We need some founding corporate partners, maybe 2 to 5 corporate partners who wants to take an active role here, just like SAP. You don't have to commit to 650 jobs, but you should commit to work with us. And we do not just work with any company. It has to be a company who understand that really to get the most out of this person, you have to work with us to understand the person, to accommodate the person. We have some values that are important for our persons to thrive. 4 values. One is respect. Expect the same as you would if this individual did not have autism. The second is accommodation. There may be some visual, audio, other challenges that we have to organize for. The biggest accommodation is really to make them comfortable by reducing stress to a minimum. Because if you stress a person with autism, all the abilities will kind of be put on hold until the person feels comfortable again. So we ask for our corporate partners to provide clarity, set expectations clearly, and if there's a question or a challenge or an issue, they need to know where to find guidance for how to deal with this question or concern or whatever. Respect, accommodation, clarity, accessibility. I think these 4 values will actually enhance the productivity in any department. I claim that a workplace where our people with autism thrive will be a good place to work. That's the feedback we get from many peers in the corporate sector. When we ask them not to use irony and sarcasm, because it can be hard for people with autism to understand, why do you say something and mean the opposite? Sometimes. Not all the time. Sometimes. When you have this expression in your face, probably you mean the opposite. That's difficult to deal with. So we ask our peers not to use our sarcasm, not to use irony. And guess what? The hard tone softens, you turn more into a family atmosphere in the department. And so I actually think that people with autism, people with disability, can have an improvement factor in any organization. Also what we heard today, that they come on time, they are so happy to work, they find the self-esteem in what they do more than who they are around. And stress is actually also hurting so many companies. It's very, very expensive for society, but I think if you learn to work with people with autism, you'll use this value-based approach in your leadership, and it will improve the situation for very many in the company, reduce stress, reduce breakdowns. So I think there are very many purposes why you should work with us. It's important that we have corporate partners who want to bring in people with autism because they can do the jobs. And then work with us to find out what kind of accommodation is needed for this individual. We need to work with the state. We have wonderful relationships with Voc Rehab in the other states where we work. But we need to work with the state who knows these people very well. We need to work with the NGO sector. We need to work with the academic sector, university, because we are social entrepreneurs, we are not very good at documenting what we do. We need an academic partner to help us on that. But I think it's now my third time in Utah. The first time was 30-some years ago. The last time was 10 years ago. And I'm here today and tomorrow, leaving for Delaware Wednesday morning. And I hope that I'll have many more visits here. I hope that maybe this could be the starting point for where we could work together, maybe form a committee based on this conference where we'll say, will there be an interest among the stakeholders here in Utah to work with us? I'm talking about people with autism and similar challenges, because I think it's general. Well, we use autism because this is where we have our starting point. I'm here because of kind of a grassroots situation where I was in despair. I formed Specialisterne. Now I'm trying to go around the world making a change. But the change is not just for people with autism. It's the way we think. It's the dandelion way of thinking. If we can all think about the dandelion and give ourselves the challenge every time we see a dandelion. Is it an herb? Is it a weed? Every time we see a person that seems challenging, do we only see the weed, or where's the angle to see the herb? Then we can benefit a lot of individuals, a lot of families. Our starting point was the IT sector, because that's where I had my starting point. But we have been working very much with the financial sector, the pharmaceutical sector, health. I'll claim that in any organization, at least 5% of all tasks would benefit from the skill sets among people with autism. And I've not met anyone who has said that's not true. Just look into your own organizations, your own companies, and I'm sure that the need for people with good memory, structured mind, pattern recognition skills, who are trustworthy, who find the joy of their life in the work, you need them all over the place. So I would like to answer questions. I would like to invite you all to be part of the 1 million job movement, not just to benefit from what we learn here, of what I've learned, but probably if we could make a community-based model for how to make the most impact of a model like ours in the state of Utah, that could also maybe be a model for the Southwest and for the US. So you're all invited to take part in the change that will be hopefully in Utah. It will be national, it will be global, and I think it will change the way we think about disabilities. Today it's very much from a health angle, where we're good at describing all the deficits, all the points where our people are different. But disability is really, for many, it's a combination of the individual and the environment. And this is what we try to change over the 4 weeks training program, where we make the best possible fit between the environment and the individual. Because if that's a good fit, then people with disabilities can be just as able. The last part is really to encourage people to be different and realize that it's because of the difference that we can create additional value together. And this is where we change the way we look at people who are different in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you for making the trip out here and those inspiring words. I have a small gift for you. I've got to tell you this story. I was at the King's English Bookshop, Betsy Burton's wonderful small business here in Utah. She had a reading by an author, Graham Simpson, who wrote The Rosie Project. Have you read it yet? Good. Yeah, well, this is a signed copy from Graham. And I was talking to him after the book signing, and I was telling him about you coming to town, and he said, "Oh, the Dane. I write about him on page 17, 13, and 30. And he shows it to me. So anyway, that's he signed that. He included his email. He wants to talk to you. We have a copy for everybody here today out here. You can grab one on your way out as our gift to you. What I love about this book is it's written from the first person point of view of someone with autism, and it's very eye-opening, I think, for people to really understand how someone with a disability sees the world, right? So we have a copy of that for everybody. We have a copy of the Invisible Disabilities film that Betsy and Fred were talking about, and the manual that goes with it, so you can walk out of here with a couple of tools. I have a feeling there are a lot of people in the audience who are going to want to follow up on this, and so I'll be the point of contact to make sure that we get talking with Torkel. And so thank you so much for being here and this great presentation. I really appreciate it. So good, thanks. I'd like to go ahead and bring this to a conclusion. Mike Drury, if you'd like to come up and say a few closing remarks. Again, thank you to our sponsors. The Global Interdependence Center let us have this global conversation today in Salt Lake City. The Utah Governor's Office of Economic Development and Goldman Sachs really stepped up and were great partners in helping this happen. So I'm going to ask Michael Drury, as the incoming chair of the GIC, to say a few words. Then we can eat lunch, and we'll reconvene for tours at 12:30.
Well, I want to thank both my mentor, David Kotok, and Stephanie for twisting my arm to come here. I was going to just go home from Jackson after my conference up there, but I'm very, very happy to be here because once again, it's broadened my horizons. Stephanie said two things here recently, one eye-opening, and two, she mentioned that there were 100 people in this room. And I've been to a lot of GIC conferences where there are not 100 people in the room, and I don't know that I've ever been to a GIC conference where more than half the audience are women. And so I asked myself, how can I be a member of the Global Interdependence Organization Center and still be, blinders on, not seeing all of the issues from all of the perspectives? And I thank you all for that, because I think this is something that tells me that we do need to widen our net in terms of what we're considering. As I look at the conference, I'm fascinated by the topic, of course, but just the progression where Philippa started by telling us basically there's not that much difference between the disabled and the non-disabled, that they're found everywhere. As Stephanie said, 1 out of every 10 people. So everyone's life is touched. And I would expect that most of the people are in this room because their life is touched in one way or another by the number of people in the United States who are disabled. And Kyle was good enough to give us the value proposition that these numbers work, that investment in social investing makes good sense. This is the greatest example of give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. It's social investing, and I see this as an interface between where I just was in Jackson, where they were talking about entrepreneurism and philanthropy, and the income inequality issues that we've been discussing a lot. They basically result in a lot of people with a lot of money, and they're starting to help out through philanthropy. And I was noting to David the other day that the nonprofit world, the world that we're in here today, the world that GIC exists in, is now larger than the government in the United States. I mean, it's a larger proportion of GDP. That only started after 2008, and it's been growing very rapidly. I find that a fascinating future. I thank Steve Saxauer for reminding us that we've been talking about this issue for over 50 years, and that his mentor, Gary Becker, one of the greatest minds in economics, thinking outside the box, got us started there, and that we need to proceed. Troy and our guest Brian, who came in, reminding us that entrepreneurs are starting to work on these issues, and that's important. Brent's comment that on our deathbeds we're not going to be talking about how much money we made, but what our contribution to society is, and I think that's critically important. And then I thought two comments by by Lori. One was that, when she was asked the question of how you evaluated these people, she said the same as everyone else, because that's the right answer, the same as everyone else. And then she reminded me that almost everyone that I work with is on other boards, and those boards are interlocking and overlapping. And that's the real strength of an organization like GIC, is being able to integrate the various people that we meet in their wide ranges of interest beyond the narrow financial market community that we start with. And then finally, I can't think of a better panel than the last panel, which got 3 great sound bites out of. I mean, first, General Burton told us that to solve a problem, you have to get to the forefront, which is absolutely right. And then Lieutenant Fred Ross reminded us that education was the key to success. And then finally, Robert Chamberlain telling us that this is hard work and that you need a champion. And as the outgoing vice chair for programs at GIC, I can tell you, you cannot hold a good program without a champion. You cannot hold any event, you cannot hold any program, any investment, anything without a champion. There's lots of people, if you say, would you like to do this, they'll raise their hand. But if you don't have someone who's going to keep herding the cats and keep things moving forward, it's never effective. And I thank Stephanie for being that. I thank many of the speakers here for doing that around the United States. And I think that has to be the continuing focus, is that we all have to continue to be champions for these ideas. And if we do, then I think it will continue to be a successful program. I thank you very much for attending. I look forward to talking with you all after. Thank you very much.